It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to this edition of Q&A with the Coach. Today we have a question from Pow7229 who says, "This is a bit of an off-topic question." No, it's not. There are no off-topic questions on this channel, my friends. But I'm in North Carolina, and we just had the storm hit. Oh yeah, I heard about the storms in the southeast U.S. Got pretty bad in certain parts. Anyway, they just got hit by the storm, and it knocked things out for a couple of days last week. We were fine, had about 3 days of provisions, and things are back to normal now. But I remember you saying that you guys had some emergency provisions when COVID hit that helped you all through the lockdown. Now people are discussing how much emergency supplies should be kept on hand when disaster strikes. I'd like your input. So how much emergency supplies would you recommend someone have on hand? I've heard numbers ranging from a couple of days to a couple of months. So I grew up in a culture of preppers, if you will. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And some people will colloquially throw out terms like the Mormons in a derogatory way because of a book of scripture called the Book of Mormon. But that's not the name of the church. Anyway, something that has been preached in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for basically as long as the church has existed is preparedness and self-reliance. And the prophets have taught from the pulpit, since I was a child, prepare yourself with food storage. And I remember when I was little, the common idea was 7 years of food storage, which sounds a little extreme, and it kind of is a little extreme. And in later years, that number went down to something more reasonable, to something like 3 months of food storage. And there are a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, they don't have the space, they don't have the means. And if that's you, if you can have at least a couple of weeks of food storage, you are going to be infinitely better off than somebody with none. It's funny, I remember when I was a kid, people would laugh at members of my church, and they would laugh at this teaching in particular. You're investing in food storage? What a bunch of crazy nuts you guys are. You think the world's coming to an end? Any one of our worlds can come to an end at any given time. Anything can happen at any given time. Our permanence on this planet it's not permanent. That's a joke. That's a myth. That is a fairy tale. We live in an ephemeral world. We are here for one moment and gone the next. And it is by the grace of God that we occupy this land for any amount of time. Do you remember that story in the Bible where Joseph was sold into Egypt by his brothers, and he's in prison, and he ends up getting out of prison by interpreting dreams. And these guys in the prison have these dreams about 7 cows, and they are gaunt and thin and sickly, and then 7 fat cows come, and the cows eat each other, and then there's another dream about these 7 ears of corn, and one group of 7 eats the other 7, and it's very confusing, and it's troubling to the people who have these dreams. And Joseph interprets these dreams. And this dream interpretation comes to the Pharaoh, and it turns out the interpretation of the dream is quite simple. There will be 7 years of famine. And so you need to prepare. Lay up 7 years of food storage, and then you're going to be golden. You're going to be great when the famine hits. And it was so. What is the moral of that story? Be prepared. It's the Scout motto. If you're ever a Boy Scout like I was, be prepared. It's important. And it's not just in case there is a worldwide pandemic that shuts down the economy and you're locked inside, or something extreme like that. It's not just if there's a natural disaster that wipes out the power grid and the infrastructure and your access to food. Anything could happen. You could get sick. There could be an emergency. There could be a death in the family. It could just be maybe you run out of gas and can't drive to the grocery store that day. Or your car breaks down. Any little thing could set off a chain reaction of events that could just mess up your day and ultimately mess up your life. So a little preparation goes a long way. It's like having a first aid kit. We don't want to be in a situation where we need one. We don't want to get hurt or cut or have a broken bone, but we definitely don't want to be in a situation where we need the first aid kit, but we don't have one. So my advice to you, have at least 2 weeks of emergency supplies on hand at all times, including water, probably especially water. Because you can survive for a good long while without food. You can't survive that long without water. So get some water tanks, get some large water containers, bottles, etc., where you can keep a good supply of water that'll last you a couple of weeks. Another thing I could recommend, something I've got here in this room on the shelves of my studio, is 4 backpacks. There are 4 members of my family, my wife, my 2 daughters. There are 4 backpacks. And in those backpacks is a bunch of emergency supplies that we can take with us on the road in case we have to abandon our home, in case we have to leave this place, and in case we have to do it in a hurry and we don't have time to pack. We can grab those emergency backpacks, head out the door immediately. And there are a lot of situations where that could happen. There's some food, there's some water, there's a first aid kit, there's emergency supplies, there's a change of clothes, basic things like that. Things that you definitely won't think about rationally in the state of an emergency about throwing together, and you definitely don't have time to if you got to run out of the house. There's a lot else I could say here. There are different levels of food storage, like long-term food storage. Like, I remember when I was a kid, we had a lot of dried grain in barrels. We had a lot of wheat, dried corn, dried beans, this sort of thing. We had barrels of powdered milk, barrels of flour, stuff like that. This is all stuff that requires time and energy to prepare. It's also important to have more short-term food storage, as in stuff that is quick and easy to prepare, and stuff you actually want to eat. Because if your entire food storage is grains of, or barrels of dried grain, and you're hungry, and your kids are begging for food, and you're like, well, I guess we got to pull out the wheat grinder. Oops, we can't plug it in because it's electric, and the power's out. Whoops. What do? Soak it in water overnight till it's soft enough to chew, except we didn't prepare any water, and so we're out of luck. What do? Think through some basic contingency plans like that. Now, you've been through a event right here, a catastrophic event with the storms and the flooding in the southeast U.S., and man, that broke my heart to hear and see some of my friends down there going through some of those situations, man. So you have a pretty good idea of what you and yours need in that kind of situation now that you've been through it, now that you've seen others who've been through worse. And it's not just food. What else do you use on a given day besides food? Toiletries, maybe? Toothbrush, toothpaste? A few really basic things can make life a lot easier if you have them as opposed to if you don't. It's also important to understand how to store this stuff. For example, if you've got something packaged in a cardboard box and then there's a flood, whatever's in that box is destroyed. There's water damage. If you've got something in a waterproof container, cool, you're good to go. If your food storage is cans and you don't have a can opener, make sure you solve that contingency problem. So how do you start a food storage? I'd recommend start small. You may not have the budget, especially after an emergency like that may have wiped out a considerable amount of your resources, and you're investing everything you have into rebuilding maybe. So how do you start accumulating a food storage? Little by little. When you go shopping, for example, and you can afford a few extra cans or something, get a few. Things that you would eat. And rotate your food storage too. This is important. Because if you just keep a pantry filled of stuff, this is just in case of an emergency, and it's sitting back there for 10, 20, 30 years, and then an emergency strikes and all of your emergency rations are filled with botulism toxin, you're going to die. So rotate that stuff before it goes bad. Generally a pretty good idea. All right, best of luck to you and yours, especially in this trying time. My friends, look to the heavens for unlimited power. Look to the heavens for unlimited power. That's never bad advice as far as I'm concerned. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.